Modern aircraft carriers weigh 100,000 tons, are packed with advanced electronics, and are built from steel as thick as a palm. Yet, 4,500 years ago, someone assembled a massive ship from cedar planks without using a single nail, and that very vessel is still capable of floating today. We are used to thinking that ancient humans were terrified of the open sea, hugged the coastline exclusively, and ventured into deep waters only by tragic accident. However, the actual facts completely shatter this myth. Wooden vessels the size of a football field confidently crossed global oceans thousands of years before Columbus, and their creators easily solved engineering riddles that still baffle modern designers. Welcome to Science Aetherix. Today we will break down 5 legendary ships that, by all laws of physics, should not have been able to float at all. We will find out why they did not just stay afloat, but literally shifted the entire direction of human civilization. We begin with the most ancient artifact, a vessel that lay in a sealed chamber at the base of the Great Pyramid for nearly 5 millennia. In 1954, an Egyptian researcher named Kamal el-Malak was clearing debris on the south side of the Pyramid of Khufu. Beneath a massive layer of limestone blocks, he stumbled upon a sealed pit carved directly into the bedrock of the Giza Plateau. Inside lay 1,224 wooden pieces, carefully sorted and arranged in a strict order, resembling a giant construction kit left without a paper manual. It took restorers 14 long years to reassemble this monumental puzzle. The results stunned the scientific world. Before them stood a majestic vessel 43 meters long and nearly 6 meters wide. This was the solar barge of Pharaoh Khufu, the oldest fully preserved ship on our planet. What is truly shocking is that there is not a single nail or metal fastener in the entire structure. The long cedar planks brought from the forests of Lebanon are joined together exclusively by wooden pegs and ropes made from halfa grass, which grows along the banks of the Nile. The engineering here is pure genius. When it hits the water, this grass swells, tightening the bonds and transforming the wooden hull into a complete monolith. Modern shipbuilders who studied the barge officially stated that if it were launched into the water right now, it would sail without a single leak. Think about that. Technologies created 4,500 years ago work more reliably than the components of some modern yachts with their high-tech glues and synthetic sealants. Historians long waged fierce debates over the purpose of this vessel. Some saw it as a purely ritual object, built for the mystical journey of the deceased ruler across the sky alongside the sun god Ra. Others pointed to clear signs of physical wear on the bottom and argued that the ship was actually used on the water, perhaps to transport Khufu's body from Memphis to his burial site. In 2021, the barge was transported from the old pavilion to the Grand Egyptian Museum. A special remote-controlled platform carried the 20-ton rarity through the desert at a walking pace, because any sharp vibration could destroy the ancient wood, which had grown accustomed to the dry air of Giza. If you enjoy this kind of historical storytelling, make sure to subscribe to the channel Science Aetherix, because the ships coming up next are even more surprising. The most curious detail of Khufu's barge is that it completely lacks a keel and a mast. The vessel was propelled entirely by muscle power. 10 rowers pulled it forward, while a helmsman corrected the course using 2 massive stern oars. Without a keel, the hull cannot effectively resist drifting sideways, and the lack of a sail leaves the crew entirely dependent on the endurance of their arms. Nevertheless, this type of production was industrialized in Egypt, as 5 more similar ship pits were discovered around Khufu's tomb. This was not a trial run. The Egyptians confidently possessed a perfected technology that served the needs of an empire long before the Phoenicians figured out how to raise the first sail. By the way, write in the comments which country you are watching from. We at Science Aetherix are very curious to know the geography of our viewers. The Egyptians masterfully claimed the Nile, but they never became true masters of the open seas. The real revolution in naval warfare tactics was made by their neighbors on the other side of the Mediterranean Sea, the ancient Greeks. Imagine a narrow wooden projectile, 37 meters long, just 6 meters wide, and weighing about 50 tons. Inside this tightly packed hull sit 170 rowers, arranged strictly in 3 tiers directly above one another. Each upper row was meticulously shifted relative to the one below it, so that the long oars did not cross in the air, keeping the ship's overall center of gravity as low as possible. This is the trireme, the ultimate strike force of antiquity, dominating the Mediterranean from the 6th to the 3rd century BC. The philosopher Aristotle aptly called it a rowing machine, a metaphor that hits the bullseye. A crucial nuance is that the rowers on triremes were exclusively free citizens, not enslaved people or convicts as often depicted in movies. If a situation required involving unfree labor, they were freed beforehand and paid wages, because the survival of the ship depended entirely on the perfect synchronization of all 170 people. Furthermore, every rower carried personal weapons and could join in boarding battle the moment they closed in on the enemy. Different types of wood were used to build triremes. Light pine, fir, and cypress went into the internal elements, while heavy, durable oak was used strictly for the outer planking. The oars, 4.5 meters long, were carved by hand from the straight trunks of young fir trees. The hull was assembled with pinpoint accuracy. The seams were caulked and poured with hot pitch, and a layer of wax was applied over the wood to reduce friction against the water. Upon the command to charge, 170 men dropped their oars into the water simultaneously. On short distances, the trireme could develop a speed of up to 9 knots, and at the moment of a ramming strike, according to engineering calculations, this figure reached 14 knots. To give you a sense of scale, 14 knots is nearly 26 kilometers per hour, which surpasses the speed of many modern cruising sailing yachts. The main and most fearsome weapon of the trireme was a massive bronze ram, rigidly fixed to the bow right at the waterline. The tactical task was brutal. Crash into the side of the enemy at maximum speed and punch a hole below the water level. This maneuver required not just speed, but phenomenal coordination from the entire crew. The slightest miss, and the trireme instantly lost its momentum, turning into an easy target for the enemy. In 1987, the Greek Navy officially commissioned the Olympias, a full-scale and precise replica of an ancient trireme recreated from detailed blueprints by naval architect John Coates. To this day, it is the only active warship of its class in the world. During real trials, a crew of trained volunteers managed to accelerate the Olympias to 9 knots, and a full 360-degree turn took this huge vessel less than 2 lengths of its own hull. Researchers unanimously agreed that in ancient times, with a professional and seasoned crew, these ships were even swifter. The historian Thucydides describes a striking incident where a trireme covered a distance of 300 kilometers in just 24 hours. The Athenian leadership had sent the first ship to the island of Lesbos with a cruel order to wipe out the rebelling population. However, the very next day, the popular assembly changed its mind and sent a second trireme with a cancellation order. The second crew rowed without stopping day and night, eating right on their benches and sleeping in shifts without letting go of their oars. They arrived literally at the last second, just as the execution order was being read to the terrified crowd. The lives of thousands of citizens were saved that day by the sheer endurance of 170 pairs of human hands and the flawless hydrodynamic properties of a wooden hull. However, these triumphant ships had one critical flaw. The lightweight wood quickly absorbed seawater, which meant the triremes had to be pulled onto the shore every evening to dry out. They remained highly effective coastal predators but were entirely unsuited for long ocean crossings. To conquer the open ocean, humanity required a completely different technological approach, and they found it on the opposite side of the globe. In 1405, a fleet emerged from the mouth of the Chinese Yangtze River, the likes of which world history had never seen before or since. The armada numbered over 200 massive vessels carrying nearly 27,800 military and civilian personnel. Leading this incredible fleet was the legendary Admiral Zheng He, a Muslim, a eunuch, and one of the greatest naval commanders in the history of the Middle Kingdom. His destiny was unique. Captured as a child during an internal war, he was castrated and sent to serve at the imperial court. but his outstanding intelligence and organizational talent allowed him to rise, and the Yongle Emperor entrusted the former captive with the most ambitious and expensive project in the country's history. The flagship vessels of this armada were called Baekuan, which translates to treasure ships. The dimensions of these giants still spark fierce debates in academic circles. According to the official chronicles of the Ming Dynasty, the length of the main flagship was 44 jang. Translated into the metric system, this yields colossal figures, anywhere from 70 to 137 meters in length, depending on which exact standard of the jang is used for calculations. Even taking the most minimal and conservative estimates into account, the Chinese giants were at least twice as long as any European vessel of that era. Many skeptics reasonably state that a completely wooden ship over 100 meters long would inevitably snap on ocean waves due to longitudinal stress. They often cite the Swedish flagship Vasa, which was only 69 meters long and managed to sink on its very first exit from the harbor in 1628. However, Chinese master builders had their own technological secret: watertight transverse bulkheads inside the hull. They rigidly divided the hold into isolated compartments. If the vessel sprang a leak in one place, water filled only that local hold, while the others remained completely dry, allowing the massive ship to continue its autonomous journey. It is a striking fact that European shipbuilding would only think of implementing such bulkheads 400 years later. Why do you think China, possessing the most powerful ocean fleet on the planet, ultimately chose to destroy it voluntarily and completely close itself off from the outside world? Share your thoughts in the comments. In 1957, during archaeological excavations at the medieval Longjiang shipyard in Nanjing, scientists discovered a massive rudder post 11 meters long. For comparison, this control element turned out to be longer than half of Christopher Columbus's famous Santa Maria as a whole. Naval engineers ran calculations and concluded that a rudder of this scale could belong only to a vessel between 138 and 166 meters in length. Today, most researchers agree on a compromise theory. One or two main ceremonial flagships could indeed reach lengths of 120 to 130 meters, while the backbone of the fleet consisted of more practical and maneuverable vessels between 50 and 70 meters long. But even 70 meters is a gigantic scale, unmatched anywhere in the world for the next 4 centuries. Over 28 years, Admiral Zheng He conducted 7 massive naval expeditions. He reached the shores of East Africa and the Persian Gulf, bringing back exotic giraffes as gifts for the emperor, which courtiers sincerely mistook for the sacred mythical unicorn Keelan, and established solid trade hubs from Sumatra to Somalia. 87 years before Christopher Columbus set off into the unknown Atlantic with just 90 sailors on 3 tiny caravels, Zheng He was already confidently managing a massive floating city. However, after the admiral's death, the direction of China's policy shifted abruptly. The new emperor issued a decree to completely destroy all blueprints, dismantle the shipyards, and place a strict ban on building any ocean-going vessels. Conservative Confucian officials triumphed over the faction of court eunuchs and explorers, and the Middle Kingdom turned its back on the global ocean for centuries to come. The unique fleet rotted ignominiously in the ports, and the priceless navigation maps, capable of radically rewriting world history, turned to ash. The Chinese Baochuans staggered the imagination with their scale, but conquering the largest ocean on the planet required not the size of a hull, but fundamentally different, deeper knowledge. The Pacific Ocean covers a whole third of the Earth's surface, spanning 165 million square kilometers of rough water, broken only by rare clusters of tiny islands. European explorers were only able to thoroughly study and map these lands by the 18th century. Yet, when the famous Captain James Cook first landed in the Hawaiian Islands in 1778, he was astonished to find that a unique civilization had already been thriving there for over 1,000 years. The Polynesians managed to settle practically every piece of land within the boundaries of the colossal Polynesian Triangle between Hawaii, New Zealand, and Easter Island. And they achieved this civilizational feat on double-hulled canoes, catamarans consisting of two wooden hulls rigidly fastened together by crossbeams, on top of which a wide living platform was mounted. The largest vessels of this type, such as the Tongan Kalia, reached 35 meters in length and easily took on board over 100 people along with livestock, fresh water supplies, and crop seeds calculated for months of autonomous voyaging. But the main secret and key technology of the Polynesians was not the ship itself, but their unique system of navigation. These people had no metal compasses, astronomical sextants, or paper charts. They had only the stars, ocean waves, the wind, and the behavior of birds. On every inhabited island, a closed guild of navigators existed for centuries, whose social status was significantly higher than that of powerful chiefs or celebrated warriors. All sacred knowledge was passed down strictly by word of mouth through a system of ritual songs, poems, and myths. A future master spent decades in training before the elders trusted him with the right to independently guide a canoe into the open ocean. Navigators held the exact position of more than 150 stars in their memory, knew how to flawlessly identify hidden currents by the character and shape of the ocean swell, and could tell the depth and proximity of land by eye from subtle changes in the water's color. They carefully tracked the seasonal migration routes of golden plovers flying from Alaska to Hawaii and cuckoos moving from Tahiti to New Zealand. When a navigator realized that land should be nearby, he released a tamed frigate bird from its cage, a bird physically incapable of landing on water because its feathers lack a waterproof layer. If the frigate bird did not return to the ship, it served as a definitive marker that land lay ahead. European scientists long arrogantly refused to believe that indigenous tribes were capable of purposefully crossing thousands of miles of open ocean. They stubbornly claimed that the settlement of the islands happened chaotically, that the boats were supposedly just carried away by storms and random currents. All stereotypes crumbled in 1976 when enthusiasts built an exact replica of a double-hulled Polynesian canoe called the Hokulea, which was about 19 meters long. The ship left the Hawaiian Islands and successfully reached the coast of Tahiti, covering a distance of 4,000 kilometers without using a single modern navigational device or sensor. The legendary navigator Maupiailug from the tiny Micronesian island of Satawal guided the vessel exactly as his distant ancestors did, orienting himself only by the stars, the direction of the wind, and the breath of the waves. When the canoe crossed the equator, Mao completely lost sight of the North Star, the main guide for the entire northern hemisphere. Instantly, right on the move, he rebuilt his entire system of calculations, switching to the constellations of the southern hemisphere. The result was that the total error upon arriving in Tahiti after a complex 4,000-kilometer journey was a mere 41 kilometers. Since then, the Hokulea has completed more than 15 massive ocean crossings. Modern computer modeling has fully confirmed that the probability of accidentally settling such a vast region through chaotic drift is virtually zero. These were clearly planned, professional expeditions by people who knew the geography of the ocean far better than we know the intersections of major highways. Today, we have traced a massive historical path, from a sealed, airtight pit at the base of the Egyptian pyramids to the ice-covered shores of distant Newfoundland. 5 unique ships from 5 completely different civilizations, separated from one another by thousands of kilometers of space and entire eras of time. And each of these engineering creations completely refutes what we are used to considering the technological limit for ordinary wood, hemp rope, and the power of human hands. The Egyptians masterfully assembled huge ships without a single nail, and their organic seams held tighter than modern steel bolts. The Greeks turned an ordinary wooden boat into a precisely guided naval torpedo, accelerating it to speeds that a sophisticated racing yacht could easily be proud of. The Chinese raised mammoth floating cities, introducing a system of watertight compartments 4 centuries before European civilization realized the practical utility of this principle. The Polynesians confidently crossed the most massive ocean on the planet, using only the resources of their own visual memory instead of a GPS satellite navigation system. The Vikings clearly proved to the whole world that a lightweight, flexible, deckless hull is capable of successfully passing through fierce Atlantic storms and delivering pioneers to a completely new continent. We live in a comfortable digital world where, without the help of a smartphone and a navigator's prompt, we sometimes cannot map the optimal route to the nearest grocery store. Yet, these people, without a single instrument, unerringly found tiny islands the size of a dot in the middle of a raging ocean that occupies a third of the globe. Perhaps the true greatness of a civilization is measured not by the number of gadgets and electronic boards it creates, but by its sincere readiness to boldly step into absolute unknown on a ship you built with your own hands. To step forward with a clear understanding, if you made a mistake in even a single wooden board, the ocean will never forgive you. You were watching Science Aetherix. Make sure to like, subscribe, and see you in the next videos.